Guest tonight has a well-rounded perspective on the law, having worked as a clerk, private practice partner, professor, and now a judge. Justice Busby became a justice on the Texas Supreme Court after he was appointed by Governor Abbott in 2019 and confirmed unanimously by the Texas Senate. Prior to joining the court, Justice Busby served on the 14th Court of Appeals here in Houston for 6 years, during which he also served for a period of time as HYLA's judicial liaison. Thank you, Justice Busby. He taught at the University of Texas School of Law and was a partner at Bracewell as well as Mayor Brown. He is a graduate of Duke University and Columbia Law School and clerked for Judge Toflat on the 11th Circuit and Justices Byron White and John Paul Stevens of the U.S. Supreme Court. Beyond his passion for appellate advocacy and review, Justice Busby enjoys connecting with his colleagues, as well as young and future members of the Texas Bar. In addition to HYLA, Justice Busby has worked closely with the Texas Young Lawyers Association and currently serves as the Texas Supreme Court's liaison to the Board of Law Examiners. Welcome, Justice Busby, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Christina. It's great to be back with the Houston Young Lawyers. This was one of my favorite extracurricular activities when I was on the Court of Appeals here in Houston. And back when I was a young lawyer, I was a committee chair for HYLA. So it's always great for me to have a chance to come and join you all again, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. And as Christina said, one of my duties on the Supreme Court, each of us has multiple liaison responsibilities for different parts of the judicial branch, and one of mine is as the court's liaison to the Board of Law Examiners. And so in addition to, the court has been occupied with a lot of different aspects of COVID ever since it started impacting us here in Texas back in March. And we've been issuing a lot of emergency orders, as you've probably seen, a lot of them to keep the courts open and keep delivering justice safely using technology like Zoom. We've had more hearings than pretty much, I think, any other state in the country so far by Zoom, because our Office of Court Administration really helped us lay the groundwork with technology so that we were ready to go on that early on. But one of the things that we've been issuing orders on, in particular going back to April, is the bar exam and how can we get folks licensed as quickly and safely as possible. And so I'll give a little bit of a history of what the court has done on the bar exam so far. And then provide some comments on our latest order of July 3rd and where we are now, and then some additional work that's been done by the Board of Law Examiners since that order in terms of the different options that are out there. And I'll provide a little bit of an update on a meeting we had earlier today, which Christina and Dean Barry and others, Dean Baines, and some of the administrators from Thurgood Marshall participated in here in Houston, and so we were delighted to have their input on the Supervised practice program, which is one of the features of the court's order, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, and then we can open it up for questions. So just to give a little bit of background, the court's first order on the bar exam related to COVID was back in April 29th, and the board put together a special committee that was working on the issue with board members and several of the deans, and we very much appreciate the deans' input on helping us with thinking through the different options and how we can do this as quickly and safely as possible. Dean Barry and Dean Baines in particular were part of the group that helped get information from the deans and bring it to the board and help us develop some solutions here. So in April, with their input and with the input from the Board of Law Examiners, which has folks who are appointed by the court from around the state in a number of different practice areas who volunteer their time to help the professional staff of the board administer the bar exam. And so with the board and the deans, we came up with an order in April that we felt like was suited to the dimensions of the COVID pandemic as we knew them at that time, and decided that rather than just having the ordinary July bar exam, we would split that bar exam up into two pieces, and consulting with the Department of State Health Services on what would be safest to do for the bar exam determined that splitting it up into two parts would allow us to socially distance people in the usual locations where we would have the bar, but providing protective equipment, providing social distancing in the facilities there. And so that we would separate the takers into two groups, one that would take it in July in person and one that would take it in September in person. And at that time, we also directed the board to continue working with the Department of State Health Services to figure out, what the protocols were we needed to put in place to keep people safe during those examinations. And we also revised our rules governing the supervised practice of law by qualified law students and qualified unlicensed law school graduates. Some of you may know that as the third-year bar card, but it also applies to law school graduates who haven't yet taken the bar exam or received their scores. And Texas has been a leader in having that program actually for probably 30 years. But the court took the opportunity to update and revise those rules and to extend them to allow more students and recent graduates to take advantage of the supervised practice program, given the uncertainty from the bar exam in terms of when it could be taken, and accommodating folks who might prefer not to take the bar exam right now, having that program out there so that they could practice under the supervision of a licensed attorney while they were waiting to take the exam and receive their scores. And so we also we got some comments on that rule and made some revisions in May and finalized those rule changes on the supervised practice program. And then in June, on the recommendation of the Board of Law Examiners, we shortened the exam from 2.5 days to 2 days so that people wouldn't have to be there interacting quite as much, and reweighted the exam a little bit just to minimize risk and also to reduce expenses for applicants. But given the changes that we were seeing in the COVID pandemic in June, and we continue to consult with the public health authorities, and the board was considering, and the court was considering, a lot of comments that we were receiving from applicants who were concerned about taking the exam in person in July in a socially distanced setting, but having everybody there in the same building, like you would normally have for the bar exam, but spread out and with protective measures. And so, taking all that into account, the Board of Law Examiners and the court considered that and decided to cancel the in-person July bar exam. And in looking at that, we had several options to consider from there about how do we go ahead and test people. And what the court decided was, we need, for people that want to go ahead and take the bar exam, we need to let them do that as soon as possible, understanding that there are a lot of people whose student loans may be coming due and who need to get out and start their practices. And so we wanted to go ahead and provide a bar exam as soon as we possibly could safely for people, and then also provide for people who preferred not to take the bar exam right now for safety reasons, provide that supervised practice option so that they could defer taking the bar exam even until February of 2021 and practice under supervision until they would get their scores from that exam. So what we did is we laid out 3 options that applicants could choose from in our order that came out on July 3rd. And one is an in-person bar exam in September. And the board has been doing some work on that and is contracting with a vendor to allow the applicants to take those exams in individual hotel rooms. And so, there are a lot of vacant hotel rooms, obviously, right now. And so having a vendor who came up to us with an idea about a way that we could basically administer the bar exam for close to the same cost or within the Board of Law Examiners budget. We're going to have to add a little bit probably to the budget to accommodate all of this, but we want to do it safely, and we know that that's of paramount importance. And so the board came to us with that proposal to go ahead and administer the exam in individual hotel rooms for September, so that it would be one applicant taking the exam in each hotel room. And they've worked out the board has worked out the details on that and has identified hotels that are willing to provide those accommodations. And the hotel rooms actually will be at no cost to the applicants and the people that are taking the exam, and they'll be able to stay there during the exam. So that's one option. Another option is, which was spurred by some of the other states early on, saying that they wanted to go to an online exam. The National Conference of Bar Examiners has developed an online exam, and so that's going to be the second option in October, is to for applicants to be able to take the bar exam online. They can choose to do that if they would prefer, rather than each applicant can make his or her own decision about, would you rather take it in person in September or online in October, and also, or to wait and defer and take it in February and practice under supervision in the meantime. And so those we thought were a good mix of options. There were some others that individual members of the court personally preferred, but that was the majority consensus of the court, and what we thought would be best serve all the different objectives that the court is trying to serve in getting people licensed safely and as quickly as we can. So that's where we are currently with the plan of administering those two different exams in September and October, online and in person. And there's more and more information continues to come out on the Board of Law Examiners website about the details of that. We also asked them to open up registration again so that more people who may have had exams canceled in other states, and we're relying on that, those exams, because we're starting to take the uniform bar exam scores from other states, and we had some people who were counting on taking the exam in another state and then being able to get licensed in Texas using the uniform bar exam score. And some of those jurisdictions then canceled their exams. And so we reopened registration and allowed students to move their registration, the applicants, the recent graduates who are applying for the bar, to move around to different options, choose among the different possibilities of September, October, or February, and reopened the registration for that. And that actually closes, I believe, on the 27th of this month. And so we're still waiting to see where all that lands and how many people will end up taking the exam in September versus October versus February. But those are the options that are out there at present. And the Board of Law Examiners is continuing to work on all the details of that and trying to get that information out so that everybody can make, and there's a very lengthy, if you haven't seen it, document on the Board of Law Examiners website of frequently asked questions that goes through a lot of the details about the various exams, so that hopefully people can make an informed choice among those different options. So that's an overview of the current order and how we got to where we are. And also one of the things that we've been looking at is how can we make that supervised practice option something that's really available and something that recent graduates can take advantage of until they are able to take the bar exam and get their scores. The board is going to add some graders so that the exam that's taken in October, those results will be available within just a few weeks of the results that were coming out from the September exam. And we had actually committed to do that too when we had a July exam, so that it won't make that much difference in terms of when you get licensed, whether you take the September or the October exam. We just want people to be able to choose whichever option they feel is better for their personal circumstances without having to worry about, is this going to cause me to have to wait much longer to get my license? And so that's one of the things that the board has been working on, is trying to be sure we get the scores back from the October online exam within a fairly short period of time after the September exam. so that won't be a consideration. But also, we realize that there are students who need to get to work, recent graduates who need to get to work and start paying off loans and start making some money and practicing, especially if they want to defer to February of next year. But even for some who are taking the exam in September or October and were planning on taking it in July, again, the September scores, I think, are going to be available within about 3 weeks of when the July scores would have been. So it's not that much longer than the traditional bar, but we recognize that can be significant for some people. And so we want to try to make that supervised practice option available for as many people as need or want to take advantage of it. And one of the things we did today is we had a roundtable with local bar leaders from around the state, including Christina, who was able to join us, and the deans and administrators from the Houston law schools and from other law schools across the state, Bill Kroger from the Houston Bar Association, and Mindy Davidson, the executive director there, so that bars and law schools can help connect students who recent graduates who are signed up to take the exam and want to do the supervised practice program with more established lawyers who have established practices and would be willing to be supervisors, so that that's a real option out there for folks who want to take advantage of it. And so we'll have more information available about that soon. I'm happy to, you can let Christina or your deans know if that's something that you're interested in, and we can get you more information about it as we're getting those programs in place and rolling out those supervisory relationships, finding volunteers to help with that. So that's a little bit about where we are, and I'm happy to answer questions. It looks like we've got a few in the Q&A. How do you want to proceed from here, Christina?
So Justice Busby, I have a few questions.
Great.
I'll kick us off with, but yes, I encourage all of our attendees to submit your questions through the Q&A. I know we have a few already, and that'll be the focus for the rest of this event. So please submit your questions. I have a few, just like I said, to get us started, Justice Busby, on the in-person exam in September. Is the idea that the hotel room option will be available to everyone, or maybe the only option for test takers, or is it just an option? And if so, how available will that be?
It's an option, and the board anticipates being able to make that available to everybody that wants to take advantage of it. One of the reasons that we ended up splitting the bar exam in 2 pieces in July and September, originally when we first started working to make this process safe under COVID, was because in the existing spaces that we were using, the convention halls and that sort of thing, in the various cities around the state, there just wasn't enough physical space to distance everybody and give them the right protective equipment and do it for everybody in July. And so that's why we split it out into July and September. But going to this hotel room option, you don't have the same space constraints. You can find a hotel that's large enough to, from what the Board of Law Examiners tells me, that they'll be able to accommodate everybody who wants to take the exam in person in September in their own individual hotel room. So that's the reason why initially we had split it out, but because we're going to a different location and using the individual hotel rooms, that's why we're able to offer it to everybody basically that wants to do it in person in September. So it's just an option, just like the online option is for October.
And how will the proctoring work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the my understanding, and the Board of Law Examiners is charged with developing all the details of this, and so I have kind of a general understanding of what they're proposing to do, to have proctors on each floor that are, kind of checking, going back and forth down the floor, I guess, during the exam. And then for the October exam, for the online exam, there's going to be some online software that'll be used to do the proctoring. And so the BLE is working out all the details of that and how to do that, for the in-person proctoring, how to get everybody in safely, and how to, have the proctor be able to check up on people but stay distanced, so that nobody is exposed to any unnecessary risk that way. You know, the proctors can do their job, but stay distant. And so that's my understanding of what they're working on, is that the proctors will be sort of monitoring each hall, and that's sort of the way that they're working on that.
And you just mentioned the online exam, so I'll ask one of the questions that was submitted through the Q&A. There's a question asking if the online exam can be taken on a desktop computer or if you need to have a laptop. Have you heard of any requirements that it be a laptop versus a desktop?
I haven't heard of any requirements about that. I'm not sure whether there's a restriction in terms of laptops or desktops. So I would think that it would probably be able to be taken on a laptop or a desktop, but I'm not sure what the BLE has worked out as far as that goes. But that's certainly a question that I can ask them.
Perhaps with a webcam or something, if that's part of the security measures.
Right. Great. I'm happy to ask that question.
Okay.
And ask them to clarify that in their FAQs if it's not there already.
And this is
great.
Along the same lines, and an interesting one. We have somebody asking if for the online exam, you'll be able to think out loud, like move your mouth, or if you're going to be limited because there's going to be some monitoring mechanism.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem.
If you're talking to someone, I don't know.
Yeah, I think my understanding of the online proctoring software is that it's sophisticated enough that it would allow you to do that. But I can certainly ask that question as well. If you're talking to yourself, sort of, in terms of trying to think of the answer, whether that is going to be a problem with the software, I wouldn't think so. But I'm happy to ask about that.
Thank you. And I maybe need to be educated on this one. I'm not as close to this, obviously, as our graduates who are dealing with this. But there's a question asking, again, I'm kind of grouping the online exam questions together for now, about using a pencil without paper for the October online exam, just to write on their desk. So I guess, are the exam takers not allowed to have paper while taking the online exam?
Yeah, I know the BLE has been looking at that issue about paper and not paper, and that's something that the court, again, typically leaves to the board to decide that level of detail. But I can certainly ask about where that stands as far as the scratch paper, because I know that has been a question that's come up, and also whether you could use a pencil to write on the furniture. I don't know about that.
Well, yeah, looking through these questions, I see that a lot of our attendees are interested in using scratch paper, that they're
Right.
taught in their prep programs to write notes and think through problems that way. And it seems like that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I wouldn't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to use scratch paper for the September exam, the in-person exam, as normal. And so I guess this is just a question for the October exam, just to be sure I have that correct. Okay.
Yes, and also that, will the MPTs be printed in a hard copy format? And I think that it's a similar thing, that a lot of people like to mark up what they're reading for answering questions. And so will they have something in a hard copy that they can annotate when taking the online exam?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I can certainly ask the board about that. Whether they'll have any printed materials. I would think, of course, this is the first time the online exam has ever been given, so there's not this is something that they're working out as they go. And I don't know that they're planning to deliver materials to individual examinees at whatever sites they happen to select. And there would be, I suppose, security concerns for the exam if the materials were mailed ahead of time. And then also, there might be personal medical concerns with having somebody physically, come to where you're taking the exam and hand out materials. So I'm not sure that that's part of the plan for October in terms of providing printed test materials for the online exam. I think all the materials are going to be online, is my understanding. But I'm happy to ask about that just to confirm that that's correct. And then I'll definitely get some more details on the scratch paper issue and ask them to update their frequently asked questions if that's not clear on there already.
It says that I had at least an attendee submit a comment that scratch paper, it says scratch paper is not allowed. And so many are curious why that's the case and if that can be changed.
Well, I'm certainly happy to ask about that. That's something that the board has been working on, the details of the exam in consultation with the folks that are setting it up and developing the software. So, I'm happy to pass that question along to them.
Thank you. I'm also seeing some questions about the in-person exam in September. And one question is, will Texas require a liability waiver for the in-person exam?
I don't think so. I think some states have been looking at that, but I don't think that we're looking at a liability waiver issue. That's the last information I had from the board on that, but that's a few weeks old. So I'm not 100% sure, but the last I heard on that was that we were not.
And Justice Busby, do you happen to know if the BLE and maybe the court has been consulting with health authorities in relation to the September exam? We have a question asking if that's been part of the process and which authorities, if so.
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout the whole process, we've been consulting with the Department of State Health Services, which is the state level agency, the state level public health agency. And so we've been consulting with them. The BLE has and the court has regularly since April, and are continuing to do that about all of the plans. And they're the ones that approved the plans for when we had July and September, like how far apart do you have to have people, have a mask for everybody, stagger people going to the restroom so that you don't have people congregating, how many stations do you need for hand sanitizer and all of that to be. So there's a lot of detail that goes into that between the BLE and the Department of State Health Services. And so they're continuing to consult with the Department of State Health Services on the plans.
And I'm looking at the questions and kind of seeing themes. So one of the things that's coming up a lot is the September in-person exam, and if the plans can change, and when would you expect that to happen, or when would you expect things to sort of be set in stone, to the extent anything can be set in stone these days, as bar takers prepare for that exam?
Yeah, well, I don't think anything can be set in stone these days, and that's been part of the lesson of this whole process is we've got to continue to evaluate conditions on the ground and protect people's safety and adjust the plans as necessary. And so we ended up doing that once to change our July-September plan about 4 weeks before that exam. Based on the changing conditions. And so, as conditions change, if they continue to change and we, receive from consulting with the public health authorities, if there are things that we're hearing concerns about, that there are changes that would impact the September exam, we're going to try to let people know about that with as much advance notice as we possibly can. But I wish my crystal ball is broken. If somebody else has one that I can use, I would love to do it. We're just going to continue to try to get the best information we can and adapt to it as quickly as we can and put out accurate information for people so they can make their plans.
We appreciate that. Is there any sort of timeline in place at the moment? Any sort of markers for big decisions, or it's moving forward?
Yeah, the BLE is continuing to have meetings, and I guess the next big timeline is Monday for people to put in their plans for, which exam they want to take, and then the BLE is going to be finalizing, those arrangements so that they know how many online examinees they need to plan for and how many hotel rooms they need to plan for. And they'll have that information by the beginning of next week so that they can start making plans, and then we're just going to continue to monitor the health situation from there. and they're again consulting regularly with the Department of State Health Services and keeping the court posted on developments from their meetings and additional plans like the hotel plan that was discussed at the last BLA board meeting and that's now on the frequently asked questions on the website. So, there's the BLE, of course, has internal benchmarks as far as things that need to happen once they know how many people are going to take each exam to be sure that they've got the right number of proctors and the right number of hotel rooms and the right number of materials and all of that sort of thing. And that's part of what they do for the court is handling all those details. And so, I'm not familiar with, when they need to know as far as what, how many proctors they're going to have and those sorts of details. But as far as if there are benchmarks from, when we're going to reevaluate the situation as far as what the virus looks like and might that impact the September exam, we're doing that on a regular ongoing basis in frequent consultation with the Department of State Health Services.
Thank you. And we just got a very helpful comment from somebody who's listening that says that BLE has updated their website that you can have a desktop computer, so you can scratch that off your.
Oh, great!
It's a follow-up question.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your sharing it.
Yeah. So Justice Busby, I know this came up earlier today on our call with the deans of many of the Texas law schools and other bar leaders. And that's the insurance aspect of supervised practice. So how will malpractice insurance be handled for graduates practicing under a supervised practice?
Yeah, and there were some really creative ideas about that on the call today, including whether insurance might be able to be run through some of the law school clinical programs. Obviously it could also be run through the supervisor if he or she's willing to provide insurance. And then the state bar is also looking into some other alternatives there if neither one of those options is available for how the supervised practice, those who are practicing under supervision might be able to be covered by liability insurance. So that's a great question, and it's one that I've asked some folks at the law schools and at the state bar to help us think through because it's an important question.
And switching gears to the supervised practice option, which of course was one thing we wanted to talk about today. There's a question asking if supervised practice participants paired with a volunteer attorney will be working in a volunteer capacity, so i.e. unpaid. I know my understanding is that supervised practice can cover people who are working for pay and also if you'd like to do it as a volunteer, but could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, and it's certainly, it's up to the individual supervisor and the individual that's practicing under supervision for whatever, it doesn't have to be pro bono by any means. You can definitely charge for your services. The supervisor needs to be involved in the billing process, but you can definitely charge for your services. And so it can be pro bono, but it doesn't have to be. I think that's one of the things that I've heard some questions on is this just for pro bono or low bono, if you will, where you're not getting compensated what you might if you're out in practice. The answer to that is no, and that's why we're wanting to be sure that there are supervisors out there and available for people who want them that will help them be able to charge, whatever reasonable rate they think they can charge for their services, during that time. And so that's what that was part of the conversation today, and part of the reason that we're looking for bar associations and law schools to reach out to their alums who are willing to help those who are interested in practicing under supervision do it and bill for their services and be paid for their services through the supervisor. And so that would be part of what we'll get a sense of from the supervisors is, are they willing to do that? You know, individual supervisors may have different thoughts about that, but you know, I've had several people say that they're willing to supervise law students already who, you know, recent graduates who are, you know, going through this period as a way to help them get into the profession and are willing to help facilitate them billing for their services. And so I think it's just a matter of getting a sense of how many people there are out there who are interested in doing supervised practice, and then being sure that we reach out to the legal community and let them know that this option is out there to help out our recent graduates and help them be able to bill for their services and make some money until they can get the results from their bar exam.
And on that note, we, HILA, would love to hear from any of you who are interested in participating in supervised practice, either pro bono, low bono, or if you would like help finding a paid opportunity. So please email our executive director, Lucy Kane, and let her know, and we might set up a more formal process for getting that information if we hear from enough of you. Justice Busby, I'm sure you saw the news today about Louisiana and their move to a diploma privilege. And there's a number of questions from our attendees tonight asking if that was considered as an option and what some of the thoughts were around that option.
Yeah, well, it certainly was considered as an option, and that's one of the options that the deans and the local bar leaders brought to us, in addition to an online exam and an apprenticeship program. And so we certainly considered all of those options. And the court's July 3rd order reflects that different justices had you know, different preferences as far as what they thought the best way to deal with that is. And as far as explaining the reasoning behind that, you know, the court's order really speaks for itself on that. Under the judicial ethics rules, we're not allowed to divulge internal deliberations about what the court's discussions were leading up to the order, and for good reason, because that needs to be a robust discussion that then is put into written form and shared with the public. And so that's what we did in the July 3rd order. And yes, there were some justices who were interested in diploma privilege, and there were also some who were interested in the apprenticeship option, which would be an option sort of like the way that we used to do people coming into the legal profession before we had law schools, where you would, you know, you would practice with somebody and for a certain amount of time, and then be able to get your license that way. And so different states have looked at different options like that. But the one thing we definitely did not want to do is what New York just did, which was to cancel their bar exam and not provide any alternative. And we felt like that would be very detrimental. And so instead, we settled on providing several alternatives for people to choose among that had support from a majority of members of the court. But certainly we discussed and considered the feedback from all of those who commented to us in the Board of Law Examiners, and there were a lot of very helpful proposals and discussions of the pros and cons of each of those, and we fully considered those, as the board did, and then we considered the board's recommendation as well, and had a very robust discussion about it at the court that's reflected in the order.
And this is somewhat of a procedural question. Could the court issue a new order and change the approach that's currently been issued?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we did that with the July 3rd order, canceling the July bar exam. And so, as I said earlier, you know, we're continuing to look at conditions on the ground and seeing how things develop and what, you know, what may be appropriate in response to that. So absolutely, it's an ongoing process and something that we're continuing to monitor, and we take very seriously our obligation to do that.
Justice Busby, this is a very specific question, and I know that some of these are maybe better suited to the BLE, so if you don't know, that's fine. Somebody's asking that the rules say that an unlicensed graduate will be allowed to take advantage of supervised practice if they've taken only one bar examination and not achieved a passing score. And this particular person took 2 bar exams, one for Texas and the UBE, where they achieved a passing score for 4 jurisdictions. Will I be able to take advantage of the supervised practice option given that I have only not achieved a passing score for one bar exam?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that as far as how it applies to that specific situation. And the State Bar of Texas is the one to check with on that. The Board of Law Examiners actually doesn't administer the supervised practice program. It's actually run through the State Bar. And so there's information in the order and on our website about reaching out to the State Bar. And if you're not able to find the right person to talk to there, please let Christina know, and I'm happy to try to put you in touch with the right person to talk to at the State Bar. And the folks that we've worked with in the General Counsel's office over there have, been very familiar with the internal process over at the bar in terms of the forms you have to fill out and the people you need to talk to. So if you're not able to figure out who it is you need to be talking to at the State Bar about that question, please let us know and we'll get you connected with the right person.
Definitely. And that question talked about taking other bar exams and maybe having passed other bar exams. I've seen a few questions about reciprocity and if there's any discussion of Texas's reciprocity rules being changed in light of some of the changes that are happening currently for other state exams, or for people who have already passed other state bar exams and are looking to take the Texas bar exam this year, maybe changing the requirements for those people if they've shown minimum competency in other states.
That's an interesting idea. I don't think that's one that anybody's submitted to us yet. So I'll certainly write that down and ask the Board of Law Examiners if that's something that they've been looking at. I know that they've looked at it as far as Ube jurisdictions, just sort of on a, that's part of the point of going to the uniform bar exam, which we're going to do next year, is to make it more reciprocal and easy for people to be licensed in more than one jurisdiction. And so there's certainly a lot of thought in normal times that's been put into that issue. But as far as whether, COVID-related exceptions, that's something that the board has considered. I don't know the answer to that in terms of reciprocity, but I'm happy to ask about that.
That would be great. Yeah, because it might help minimize the number of people who are either going to be sitting in person or online to take the exam this fall. And there have been some questions about Texas's transition to the UBE. Has there been any discussion of that changing? Is the plan still to move to UBE in 2021?
Yeah, that's the current plan, is to start with the UBE in February of 2021. But again, that's, subject to examination as we see how conditions on the ground continue to change. So, we understand that people have been studying to take a non-UBE exam, and that the UBE is a different exam. So that's certainly something that we're going to be mindful of if plans change further, as far as the, when do we want to phase in the UBE component. And also, I think that's definitely something that we're going to be keeping in mind. And also, I think it's important to know that this is something that we actually started thinking about last year more generally about how should we license lawyers, even outside COVID. And Texas is participating with the American Bar Association's. They have a group on the future of legal education, and Texas agreed to be part of a pilot project with this ABA Commission on the future of legal education to think about that question. How do we want to be testing and licensing law graduates, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? We've decided to go with the UBE for now, but it's something that we were already starting to think about even before COVID hit, and I think Texas is really positioned with leveraging the resources and expertise that the ABA is able to bring us through this commission to have that conversation going forward about how do we want to be licensing people, not just during COVID, but after COVID. Are we testing the right things, and what, different professions admit people different ways. Some people have suggested that maybe we should have more practical type modules, which some doctors do it that way, accountants do it a different way. There are some people have, some professions have multiple shorter exams at different times, that sort of thing. So I think, all of that's on the table for discussion, and we're grateful to the ABA for the chance to partner with them and think really creatively for the long term about how do we want to be licensing people. So this is a conversation that we were starting to have even before COVID, and I think COVID has accelerated it in many ways, but there's a lot to think about in terms of creative options and what is the soundest way for the future. So that's something that we're going to continue to be working with the ABA on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very important, interesting conversation. And we have a lot more kind of into the weeds question. And so I'll give you a few of those and see if you have any information for our attendees. One is, or several have asked about lowering the passing score for either administration. And I think they're talking about the two this fall. So the September and October, has there been talk of lowering the passing score?
Yeah, I know the Board of Law Examiners has looked at that, and they've also looked at widening the regrade range and as an alternative to that, because I think before this it was, and don't hold me to these numbers because I'm not as familiar with the details of the regrade system as the board is, but I think it was if you were within 5 points of passing, that was an automatic regrade, and so they're looking at widening that band for these two exams. And I think they've also been discussing the certainly there's been some discussion of the changing of the passing score, but I've also heard the discussion of would it make sense to widen the regrade range and handle it that way. So I know they're looking at those options.
Justice Busby, some questions have been submitted about the software for the online exam and whether test takers will have an opportunity to become comfortable with that software or be given some extra time to play around with it and make sure they know how to use it. And I don't know if that's been discussed, but I think that might be something worth bringing up with the BLE as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to pass it on. That seems like a very reasonable request to be able to figure that out and get a sense of what it's going to be like. So let me ask about that and ask them to provide some more information in their FAQs about that.
That would be great.
And it may be that they're still working on that with the National Conference of Bar Examiners that's developing the test, so on the online version. So it may be some time before we have some clarity on that, but I'm certainly happy to pass it on to them and ask them to take a look at that.
Another question is, and I think this is an interesting one, is would it be possible to extend the deadline for making a choice until all the people who will be taking the exam get more details about the September versus October exam? I think you said, and I remember this from our call earlier today, that the current deadline is the 27th.
Right.
Is there any flexibility on that?
I don't think so, because they need to be able to reserve the number of hotel rooms with the various hotels and secure the right amount of tests and the right amount of proctors and all of that for the number of examinees that we're going to have. And so my understanding is that's why the BLE set that deadline when they did, and they're trying to provide as much information as they can as soon as they can get it from the National Conference of Bar Examiners and others as to what the two options are. And we've provided the details about how many questions of different kinds are going to be on each exam and all of that. And then provided the details about the hotel plan so that people will have an understanding of what those options are, as much information as we can provide. So if there are specific questions that people don't know the answers to, we can try to get those, but that's the reason for those deadlines, is they've set them as late as they can to try to give as much information as they can, but then they've got to physically get the materials and the sites and the proctors and all of that in place so that it'll go smoothly, and all the protection and medical plans in place so that it'll go, public health plans in place so that it'll go smoothly and safely.
And I apologize for jumping around. I'm now going to ask a question about supervised practice again.
Sure.
And this question is, would supervised practice place any limitations on me working in a prosecutor's office as far as what I'd be allowed to do? So I guess the question, just more broadly for others who are listening, is could you do anything a lawyer could do under supervised practice or not?
Yes, absolutely. You can work in a prosecutor's office under supervision. You can participate in a trial, and there are details in the supervised practice rules about that. And you can get those on our website and also at the state bar. But yes, you can do that in a prosecutor's office and any other kind of practice. And that's actually one thing we did when we updated these rules that were originally written in the 70s to make it a little clearer that not only, it was pretty clear about court practice, but it was not as clear about transactional practice and that kind of thing. And so we tried to bring it a little more up to date and make clear that it could apply to any kind of practice.
And this question is also about supervised practice. The question says that supervised practice requires that students sit for the next available bar exam. And if the next available bar exam is February 2021 and COVID is still rampant, what options are available for students who are still adverse to the idea of sitting for an in-person exam?
Yeah, well, we're happy to look at that. It is, you don't have to sit for the next available exam. You can sit for September, October, or February and still take advantage of supervised practice. But as far as whether beyond February would if conditions continue as they are, would we be willing to take a look at extending that? We'll definitely keep that under consideration as we see how things develop, for sure.
This is interesting. This is going back to something we were discussing just a little while ago. This attendee says that a board member of the BLE brought up temporarily lowering the pass score last week, but they pointed out that only the Supreme Court can do this. Are you familiar with that, Justice Busby? Is it something the court is actively considering?
Yeah, well, that's right. The court does set the cut score, they call it, by rule, and so if we're waiting on the BLE to not waiting on them, but we're certainly happy to consider a recommendation from them. Typically what they'll do is if they want to make a change like that, we had to change the cut score when we went to the UBE because it's different from the NBE, for example, and so that's probably the last time we changed the cut score because we needed to set one for the UBE. And so I remember we got a recommendation from the BLE on that and made a decision about what Texas's cut score was going to be. And so I know that the BLE did discuss that issue about should the cut score be changed versus should the regrade band be widened, and changing the regrade band is something that the Board of Law Examiners can do themselves versus changing the cut score would be something that the court would need to do, and so we're if the BLE feels like, we're going to wait to see what their thinking is and what their recommendation to the court might be on that. But at present, we don't have a recommendation to change the cut score.
That's very helpful. This is going back to supervised practice. Has there been an extension on the date to submit a supervised practice application?
Yeah, I think you can do it any time. I don't think there's a particular date by which you have to do it, is my recollection of the rules, but I encourage you to look at the rules on that for more details. Again, they're on our website, and on the state bar has that information available as well. But I think you can start that basically any time you want. So I don't think nobody's missed a deadline on that if that's something that you're interested in taking advantage of.
Good, yeah, and hopefully that is an option available to many of the graduates and their supervisors who are interested in working with them too. And there was an interesting question about incentives for senior attorneys to supervise graduates. Are there any incentives aside from wanting to help out this population of graduates who's already facing a lot of challenges?
Well, I think that's, one of the things we were talking about today is actually that local bars experiences have been that there are a lot of more established attorneys who are willing to be involved in mentoring programs and these sorts of programs, as a matter of paying it forward and mentoring the next generation of the profession and helping people through a challenging time as well. And so, that's certainly not something that the legislature has appropriated funds to the court to fund. But I'm not sure that additional funding is necessary for that. It has been the sense that I got from our meeting today is that there are a lot of people who may be willing to help out newer, incoming lawyers in their community or people from their law school, which they also graduated from, and that's not, securing. It's not going to be necessary to provide a financial incentive to get the numbers of supervisors that we would need to get to do that. So, and again, too, you've got to work out with your supervisor sort of how the billing is going to work and all of that. That's something that the supervisor has to be involved in as well. But, I think what the sense I got was that a lot of the bar associations and law schools felt like they would have plenty of volunteers if there are people who are interested in doing supervised practice. And so that's the other piece of what we talked about is gauging interest in supervised practice. And I appreciate so much you and Lucy and HYLA offering to be a point of contact for folks who are interested in doing that in Houston, so that we can figure out who out there is in fact interested in it, and can get about trying to match people up with supervisors if they don't have one already.
That was the same impression I got, and I hope that turns out to be the case. And like I said before, if you're interested in being matched with a supervisor, please contact us. We're working closely with the HBA this year and other organizations. Justice Busby, I see a few questions, and I don't want to be mindful of your time, so I'll only take a few more. I see a few questions, and we touched on this earlier, about reciprocity. And so the ones I see are about other states doing UBE exams, other states doing online exams now to address COVID, and then perhaps others who have already passed another state's bar. So I think you covered this. Is this something that is hopefully going to be discussed as an option for those trying to figure out how to get licensed?
Well, I made a note about it. Again, that was the question that was asked earlier. That was the first I had heard about a reciprocity, the first suggestion that I'd gotten as far as reciprocity, and it may be something that the BLE has already started thinking about and looking into, and I'm happy to ask that question. There are existing rules for reciprocity for UBE already, but for states that are doing online exams, or if you've taken another state's bar in the past or something like that, and I know there have been some issues between or among UBE states that I've been reading about as far as will one UBE state take another state's online exam and exactly how is that going to work. And since we don't administer the UBE yet, I'm not as familiar with how those states are handling that particular issue. But I've certainly made a note of the question, and I'm gonna check in with the BLE and get their thoughts about it.
And I see that there are a lot of questions too about the in-person exam in September and sort of logistical questions about taking their materials into the room. Can they open a window to get some air and reduce any risk of contracting the virus, even if only a little, and things like that. So I think those are maybe questions better tailored to the BLE, and it seems like they're keeping that FAQ up to date. So if you could inform them that these are some of the questions that are being asked, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
And also to know which hotels are maybe going to be sites for the exam.
I don't think they've released individual hotels yet, and that may be dependent in part on how many people sign up by Monday for the in-person hotel option. So, people are going to vote with their feet, as it were, and we need to have rooms to accommodate them all. But I think the FAQ was just updated in the last day or two with some information about the locations in each city, the neighborhoods, if you will, where those hotels are going to be located. And so I don't know that there are particular hotel names up there yet, and that may be in flux still. And once we get a sense of how many people are actually going to be taking the September exam, but there is some general information about location that's been added to the FAQs, I think, in the last day or two.
Well, Justice Busby, we've taken an hour of your time, and we're so appreciative of you sharing that with us. We answered over 40 questions, so thank you for being so helpful and giving that information to our attendees. To everyone who joined, thank you for joining. Best of luck on the exam. Please let Hyla know how we can be a resource to you. We're really looking for ways to help.
Well, thank you, Christine, and HYLA for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for your questions. I appreciate those, and the ones that I don't know the answer to, I'm definitely going to follow up with the Board of Law Examiners and ask them to provide FAQs and more information as they have it to you, so that you can be as informed as you can, and because we understand that's an important part of doing your best on the exam, and this is a challenging time for everybody, and we're trying to. We appreciate all the feedback, and we're considering it, and trying to make this as safe and expeditious a process for everybody as we can. So we appreciate your help with that and your questions, and we're going to continue to work on it.
Thank you. Everyone have a good night.
Good night.